Well, I hope you've all had a nice week. I am at my parents' house in Rhode Island, having celebrated my daughter's 13th birthday and my sister's. So that was really nice. And this morning, what I'd like to take some time to talk about with you is how to use the moon, to tap in and connect with the moon as you continue through the rest of the year. And I really love being in connection with the cycles of the moon as part of my practices. I got really interested in it a few years ago and taught some workshops on each quarter phase of the moon. So this won't be as in-depth as something like that is, but I hope to give you some ideas and some tools and the basic energetic sense of each quarter of the moon, so that as you continue through the year, you have them to use. We actually just had a new moon on Friday. So January 24th was a new moon, and that moon ushered us into Aquarius, which is kind of like the waters of release. And my favorite astrologer, who, if you're interested, I'll send you a link to her. I love her. She's very smart. She knows her stuff. And she's definitely a feminist and like down with those kind of energies. I think she's really interesting. But she was talking about, as we move through our lives, what change looks like, and saying, don't be afraid to be unrecognizable. And I just thought that was so wonderful and interesting. So I think that we'll start with the energies of the new moon. And you can get an intuitive sense of this in yourself. When you think about or feel into an energy of a dark sky, and the moon being absent from the sky. This is the phase of coming into intention. There's an openness to possibility. So really tapping into this energy of potential, that everything is open to possibility. And so if we were to use the metaphor of a garden, this would be the phase where we're planting seeds. So in this new moon energy, it's very fertile. It's fertile ground or fertile sky, if you will, for setting intention. Some different questions that you might want to ask yourself during the new moon, and you can certainly go through the questions we did for intention setting. But what are you wanting to attract into your life? What are you wanting to birth or rebirth? What are you ready to learn? How can I grow into alignment with my purpose? And when we're in this this open phase, a great question, I think, is what am I ready to receive? Do you know, having just the moon has emptied out of the light in a sense, so it's very open and empty and ready to receive. It's a receptive phase. So really moving into the intention setting, and a lot of people like to journal during this time. You're really touching into what would you like to invite into becoming? What are the little seeds you're planting? And that for me is much like the winter energy we're in right now. Do you know, we're in this rest phase, this kind of darker phase, and we forget sometimes that underneath the surface, in the soil, it's like everything's getting ready. Everything's having a rest. It's like this germination period. What's ready? What little sparks of electricity might exist in you that really want to start tapping into life? So working on intentions here, a meditation that can be great for this phase of the moon is the meditation that I taught on Monday, where you're drawing all the energy into the center. And I taught it as the heart, but sometimes we feel intentions in the solar plexus or the gut. But for me, it's really a drawing into center and infusing that energy with your intention, really like making it palpable, saturating it with your intention, and then sending it back out into the limbs. And for some of you, beyond, right? Out into the space of, yes, I see Amy smiling, out into the space of the aura, and letting kind of your energy bubble be really potentiated with that intention. So from the new moon, we're really working on those intentions, planting those seeds, covering them, giving them love. And then we move into the first quarter. So this is the waxing moon. And you can probably just in yourself, as the moon goes from dark and starts gaining light, right? You start seeing the little sliver of the crescent, and then it starts filling in through the first quarter. This is a growth phase, right? This is a phase where whatever intentions we've planted are starting to, bud up. It's like springtime. The little crocuses, those little first flowers of spring are popping their heads up through the soil. And this is the energy of spring. It's the energy in many traditions of the East. So new beginnings, right? This energy of coming into being. In the archetypes, it's kind of more maiden energy, a youthful energy. And I love, for me, a mantra here that I find potent is, I wholeheartedly welcome. And then you fill in what it is you're wanting to welcome. I welcome the growth of, you're just really honing in on that energy. We're tending the garden in this phase. And it's also a phase where we're really starting to gain power. This can be a phase where we're really, for me, sometimes calling back power or tapping into guides, calling on your helping spirits to make these things happen. In a meditation practice, for me, during this particular phase, I'm more focused on the inhales. Right? At the most simple, I want to give you breath things here. So during this first quarter, you might come into just a very simple, you have your ritual spray, you have your rattle, you could rattle, spray, and then sit and focus on the inhalations, right? See what's happening here, that energy of from nothing growing. And as you feel into that, being with, I wholeheartedly welcome, or I feel whatever it is coming into my field or my life or things like that. Let me see, I have notes here. I want to see what else I want to say about this particular phase. Yeah. So this phase to me also feels healing in some ways. There is an energy of, as things are coming in, there's a certain healing that happens with that. We'll talk in a minute about release energy. But for me, this particular energy, there's a lot of potential. I think because it's a fresh start, a new beginning. It's like tending sometimes in this phase to the child in you. So you can spend time in this phase noticing any emotions or core held beliefs that feel old to you. And I don't mean old like old wise. I mean, like, sometimes you get a feeling, or I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I get a feeling, and when I really explore it, I'm like, wow, that has been with me for a long time. or wow, that has roots in my childhood. Do you know? And I can feel that I was doing something on like not feeling special. Actually, I was doing it on the plane ride up here with my daughter. She was watching a movie and I was meditating. And, you know, in tapping into this, I'm not special or I'm not noticed, it wasn't the adult Michelle. Do you know, like the grown up me feeling that? There was something very young in me that had the sense of I'm not special. And so for me during this phase, um, being willing to listen to some of those younger voices that might be bubbling up for me, I try and really tune into those kind of the more childlike. And sometimes that looks like play. Sometimes during this quarter of the moon, spending more time outside being goofy or silly or, you know, like bubbles can tap you into that energy. Both bubbles like blowing pretty bubbles and bubbles like bubble gum. I know it sounds just bananas, but it really actually works. There's something in us that can tap into those things. All right, so if we're moving through the quarters, after the waxing moon, we come into the full moon. And I feel like most of us, you know, growing up in America anyway, there definitely is a cultural sense of noticing the full moon. Just it's almost unmissable, and even in our cinema, in our books, there's a knowing that something maybe special, maybe wild happens during full moons. My mother by trade is a nurse midwife. She's retired now, and my stepfather is the director of an emergency room. He's a doctor. And, you know, though they're very analytical, during the full moons, they would both notice the emergency room would go wild. My mom would be delivering all sorts of babies. Do you know, she never wanted to be on call during the full moon. And for two people very deeply based in the scientific realms to acknowledge that, I always got a kick out of it. But in the full moon, if you're looking at working with the energy of the full moon, you're looking at kind of the 7 days of the full moon. So the full moon itself, and then the 3 days before and the 3 days after are thought to be the most potent for doing different kind of practices, or if you do magical work during that time. A lot in a lot of traditions, this is a time to charge your crystals. So if you have crystals or statues or physical things that you work with, putting those out in water in the full moon can charge them. Sometimes I'll just put water out in the full moon, and you know, it's like woo woo witchy holy water. It gets charged with the energy of the full moon and is very potent. During this phase of the moon, I think it can be really powerful to moon bathe. To go out just under the full moon and let that light shine on you. I'm really lucky to love camping. So I've spent a lot of time in nature under the full moon, and it really has a different quality. You know, if it's not comfortable or you're not in an area where it's safe or interesting to go outside in the full moon, you could even bring this into a meditation. Right? You look outside your window, get a sense of the kind of silvery, cool light, and then go into a meditation, and you could imagine yourself, you know, in a beautiful meadow or a forest glen or by the beach, whatever's appealing to you, and really draw that moon energy in. There is a qigong practice calling down the moon. And maybe next week I can show it to you because it has physical movements associated with it. So those are some beautiful and powerful ways to be with the energy of the full moon. Some other, in terms of how you think about it maybe or feel into it, this for me is the phase of the moon that I'm interested in being with abundance, right? Can you get the sense we started empty, we filled up a little bit, and then are back, we're in the fullness now. We are full of light, we are full of power. And in this particular space, I think it's a really wonderful place if you're interested in doing gratitude practices, to call in gratitude, the metta meditation that I asked Marcia to teach to you. It's a lovely time to come into that and sense into those energies. In this one too, I focus more on the inhale. And if it's comfortable in your body, you can be with just a very slight inhale retention. So you inhale and you can pause at the top. I'd like to highlight here that you don't want to grip or strain around this retention. It's not about holding your breath as long as you can, or forcing a retention. It could be a 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. But in that space, so you inhale, let it be soft and smooth. You retain your breath at the top, and you can really focus on noticing the abundance that's already here. What's already here in your life that is okay, or brings you joy, or that you have enough of, right? You have enough air to breathe. Maybe you have enough water to drink. It can be really simple. You can pick something, I don't know, I have enough forks, or whatever it is, shoes. Sometimes it's like you feel into the richness and abundance of everything we truly have. And sometimes it's like, oh gosh, life doesn't feel abundant right now. So you find something. But in the full moon, we're really tapping into the richness and the light that's here, the power that exists in us, the fullness of what's here. This is, like you're 9 months pregnant on this one. Do you know, like the moon is very full. You're very full of whatever's here. Let me see what's here. The goddess associated with this, I know some of you are interested in that, is Lakshmi. So for me, this is energy of the south. It's fire. It's energy of transformation. To me, in the northern hemisphere, it's like summertime. It's full. Our garden is completely full. It's like overflowing. You look out into your garden and the peas are all going up the vines, and all the zucchinis are blossoming. It's beautiful. It's abundant. But Lakshmi, her seed sound is Shrim, and you can do beautiful meditations with Lakshmi, calling her in. So that might be an area for deeper exploration for you as you continue being with these different meditative practices. Let me see. I get so excited about all of this. I want to tell you 7 million things and show you 16 mudras for each one, but I'm trying to contain myself. So from the full moon, and this sense of abundance, of fullness, of being with the inhale, of being with what's already present, and the fullness that exists in our lives, we move into the last quarter. And the last quarter is the waning moon. And I think that there's its own kind of magic in this one. And this one is the phase of the moon where we are really with the energy more of emptying out. Do you see how this makes sense? We go from that fullness, from that abundance, into a space of releasing. And we're making ourselves ready to receive again in the new moon, right? And emptying out. But this last quarter, we're really doing more on release. So the correlate for that is being with the exhalation. So as you go into your practices, as you spend time watching the breath, at some point shifting into really aligning with the energy of the exhale, and feel yourself starting to empty out. The inhale just happened, and then riding the exhale and feeling that energy of letting go. For me, in this phase, you can really do some deeper explorations around what's ready to let go. This is a phase for me, more attuned with, I don't know, I'm careful with this word, but purification practices. So, it might be a time that you would do a cleanse if that's something that you're interested in, or coming into different meditative practices that are considered more cleansing. Sometimes that can be imagery meditations. The subconscious is so rich with image. So sometimes during this phase, I kind of playfully say it's kind of laundering, doing the laundry of your subconscious, to be with image meditations. And it can be very simple, kind of like the yoga nidra that a lot of people are used to, where you're just hearing images. The teacher's teaching and they're saying full moon, beach at night, black crow, whatever it is, and calling those in. And there's kind of a flushing out of images from a deeper level. And it's interesting because those can be so powerful. And they're not literal. Lots of things can start to flush out from there. So for me, doing imagery practices during that time can be super powerful. And there's a beautiful practice on forgiveness, when you talk about letting go. In this particular practice, I've, kind of nudged it and changed it over the years, but it originally came to me reading a book of forgiveness by Desmond Tutu and his daughter. Lovely, lovely book. And to me, forgiveness really is a movement of love, but there can be very literal ways that you practice the energy of releasing. And I'll give it to you just kind of simply because it can be a very simple practice. In this particular practice, I love to teach it, but you can take a stone just from outside, like literally walk outside and get a rock. And for some people, writing a word on it or a name or something that they're wanting to forgive can be interesting and important. And then you take that into a meditation. And the way that I do it, and sometimes I don't even focus on one specific thing that you want to forgive, but there's a certain energy in practicing releasing. So you could just have the rock in your hand and feel the squeeze of it, the contraction around it, the gripping, and then just practice opening your hand. And this, you might notice that your hand only wants to open a smidge, totally okay. And you could match this with the breath. So with the inhales, really clasping the rock. And then as you exhale, feel into the energy of opening the palm, of releasing that energy. And you can do that over and over. And, you could do this for weeks, for months, but at some point it can be so potent and powerful to then take that rock, that stone, and either offer it into a river, a lake, a stream, or even bury it in the earth. And in that way, have the sense that, I love the sense of the earth kind of recycling or composting that energy. And you give it to the earth, and the earth receives it and renews it. There are obviously more, I'll say, I don't want to say complex, because I feel like that actually emotionally is a very complex practice. Um, but there are more detailed or step-oriented practices around forgiveness or release. But that one, in my experience, both personally in my own body and as a teacher, having taught it a lot of times, really carries a great significance with it. So I would offer that as a practice. As the moon is turning into a dark moon, as it is turning to the new moon, the dark moon, really to just get into that energy of openness, of releasing, can be really powerful. Um, the energy of that last moon moving into the new moon also aligns with the autumn. It is the element of water, actually, and brings us into, um, we're moving into the darkness. And I think many of us, that feels like, just the sound of it feels kind of scary. You're like, oh, moving into the darkness. But really, traditionally, there's so much knowledge there. There's so much to be learned and gained there. And from kind of a divine feminine perspective, many traditions have that sense of cave as womb. So going in and being in the darkness in that way. But the Celtic tradition had a tradition of what they call the wellspring. And I love this imagery and this energy for this phase of the moon. In these traditions, the women's were the keepers of these well springs. And I don't know if you've ever been to a wellspring where you're walking in nature and just up out of the earth, water bubbles up. This is the kind of wellspring I'm talking about. Sometimes you dig down a little bit, but in some land, the water just bubbles up. And hundreds of years ago, women were the tenders of these well springs, and they were thought to be healing waters. So the women were the tenders of these healing waters, and the feeling of them was that they obviously burrowed deep down into the earth, into the darkness of the earth, into the mystery of the earth, and that these waters were carrying up with them ancient knowledge from deep, deep in the earth. Oh, I get chills just saying it. And so in this phase, there really is this sense of um, tapping into our courage to go deep within, tapping into our courage to explore, um, the places in us that need or want to be healed, but also acknowledging our power in that. Right. There's a deep power in that, and a tradition of, the divine feminine, which we all have, regardless of, gender identity, tending to the knowledge that will arise from our depths. And there's something about that. If we each feel in, for some of us, it's deep, deep belly. Some traditions call it the dantian, the lower dantian. We get into the hara lines, that deep, deep belly. For some of us, it's a wellspring of the heart. And so feeling in this phase of the moon into our depths, and maybe just letting there be some space to see what's bubbling up, to see what's coming up from these places. So that can be beautiful kind of imagery and sense for this phase of the moon in coming into release. And then, the beautiful aspect of cycle is that once we've been with the waning moon, we've done these practices to empty out, and we're ready again to plant the seeds in the new moon. right? So we've emptied out, and we begin again with the new moon to set our intentions to plant the seeds in this fertile soil that we've been tending, and it rolls in that way. So I love moon energy, so I thank you for asking about it. And for this particular one, if you have questions about this, follow-up questions, do feel free to reach out. Or if there's a particular ritual or meditation I talked about that, you know, um, rung a bell somewhere in your body. Do you know what I mean by that? Like you heard it and you were like, yes. Let me know. And if I have some space this week, I could probably do a quick, like 5 or 10 minute audio on it so that you have that to move into the phases. I really have found it just incredibly powerful to align with this um, as a means of uh, connecting with nature and with my own rhythms. So I thank you all so much for your time and attention. And if there are outstanding questions or things you want clarified, let me know. Namaste.